Okay, let's get started then. Tonight we're going to go through a lot of different things. I'm going to try to motor through the lecture part so we can get through to the demonstration parts. Because I feel that's where a lot of the learning actually happens, in the sense of someone can actually kind of visualize it, see it for themselves, so they can understand in the sense of, okay, this is what's actually happening in someone's body. So we get some of the context first, and then we'll go to actually a little bit more of what's actually happening in someone's system. So I've kind of integrated a whole bunch of slides, so you guys will have to bear with me tonight. In the sense of I don't necessarily know what slide is next, in the sense of it's changed some too. So before we got here. So feel free to ask questions as we go. That's also, I feel, kind of a big aspect of learning. So, because other reason now is a great time to ask questions, not necessarily this instant, but as we kind of start getting along, is because when I actually start doing some of the demonstrations, typically we try to do some talking during them. The goal tonight will be to try not to talk during the demonstrations, so that way we can ask questions after, obviously, but in between. But it's just in the sense of just kind of respect for the person who's on the table. So we're going to start with some real basic Discover stuff first. See if we can get this to work. Nope, there we are. So if you guys have been to any of my classes, you've probably seen these slides, or at least concepts within these slides and the statistics. I mean, basically the goal of me to really, in the sense of really some of these slides, is to help you understand, I mean, the state of the United States healthcare just isn't that great. And this is even kind of before some of the changes that took place. But really dumping more money into a system that doesn't function isn't ultimately going to change the problems you have with the system. It's just going to make it just that much more expensive. So when we take a look at this, I mean, this was 2008, 2.4 trillion in spending. I mean, only 5% actually goes to keeping people healthy. So you can pretty much see that 95% of basically what's spent is on disease care, is really on people are sick and just really ultimately just keeping them there. Because we'll help you understand in a little bit about what some of those differences are, in the sense of, okay, what actually is healthcare, what is sick care, what is disease care, stuff like that. The goal of tonight really isn't to get too much into that, so we're going to kind of go through that. But nearly 1 in 2 Americans has some form of chronic disease, basically stating that you can't get rid of it, or not that you can't get rid of it, but in the medical sense, you can't get rid of it, and it's kind of permanently there. The thing that's even more scary is when you take a look at the seniors. The seniors, 90% have at least one, 77% have two. So the vast majority of seniors have a lot of chronic disease, and I'm sure if you kept going down these statistics, I mean, 3, 4, 5, 6, I mean, you think of all the seniors, I mean, the people that you guys even know, maybe your parents, friends, stuff like that, or even maybe your grandparents, for some of you. But when we take a look at that, I mean, it's basically really shows what people have done have led them up to the point of where they're at. And really, in the sense of the rituals, the habits that you have today, really become your anatomy, really become your physiology, your expression of your body later on. So if you have healthy habits, you can express healthy things. If you have unhealthy habits, you're not going to express that healthier thing. So, and that's one of the things I really want you guys to start to understand with this slide, in the sense of starting to understand that you have a choice. You have a choice to really make an impact on what does your future look like. Are you going to, from this point on, I mean, because today really is the tomorrow of your yesterdays. And if you start dissecting that statement a little, I mean, everyone's like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. Well, today is the tomorrow, finally. I mean, it's here. It's, what are you waiting for to make that change? Why hasn't it happened? Why hasn't it really happened yet for you? What are you waiting for to make that shift, to make that change? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you guys to write down your goals tonight, is because I want to help you understand the sense of maybe some of the goals that you wrote down, to help you understand in the sense of your shift, your focus, what you're actually focusing on to basically be aware of. So you can maybe make a better goal for yourself. How about that? Something that's maybe more sustainable, something that actually gets you to where you want to go, as opposed to maybe somewhere where you don't realize that your goal is actually hindering you from getting to where you want to be. So, in the sense of, I guess the final thing when we take a look at this, I mean, you think of cardiovascular disease, heart disease, I mean, strokes, cancer, all of those things are really lifestyle induced. We're going to keep moving. You guys have been to my classes, you probably know this statistic. I mean, so the thing that I wanted to point out with this one, so we're 37th in the sense of where our healthcare system ranks. And this is a little bit newer statistic compared to some of the other ones we utilize sometimes. But 72nd, I mean, typical will commonly rate this as far as wellness, but when you actually break it down, this is actually where the health of people are. So 37th is our healthcare system. 72nd is where we actually rank for health, how healthy we are. So that's crappy, to say the least. So obviously we can do a lot better than that. But if you think, I mean, if we know what systems, we know what model has really gotten us to today. And you know, the thing that I want you also to understand is, you know, in the medical system, you know, the traditional medical system, in the sense of the way it's practiced, the way it's taught, realize that there is very applicable times, there's very useful times for it. But it's when it becomes your kind of standard practices, this is what I'm waiting for, this is how I function with my everyday life. I mean, we know where that gets you. That gets you exactly where we're at. And spending a lot of money and doing more of the same thing, I mean, literally is just doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. Does anyone know who said that one? Einstein. Definition of insanity. So it's, yeah, and that's really, I mean, that's really what, if you take a look at the system, that's really what we're doing, is we're just dumping more money in, and that's literally just to do more of the same. But how can you possibly expect a different outcome unless something actually shifts in the thinking? And that's what our goal here tonight is, help you shift your thinking. Most of you guys thinking's already shifted. I mean, it's the level 3 class. To get here, there's some aspect of shift that pretty significantly had to happen. So, you know, why is it that we know what to do but don't really do it? Why can't we actually sustain that change? I mean, how many of you have made New Year's resolutions? I mean, this year, maybe in a different year. And then, you know, how long was it before that New Year's resolution came, oh, it's not something I have to do, and then it became, it's like, oh man, you know, like you maybe went out one time, it's like, okay, well, I'll just kind of break that this once. And then when did you break it once, and then when did it become into like, as opposed to it has to happen, oh, maybe it can happen, or to put into the final point where it's like, you know, it's not really part of my resolutions anymore. So, you know, and that's what I really want you guys to start to think about is, when in your life was something important enough that you created the shift, created the change, that change actually was consistent for you moving forward. Because that's something what you want to realize in the sense of, because everyone kind of functions a little bit differently. And what we want to do is start to build on, you know, the positive ways that your bodies create change, the positive ways that you create growth for yourself, and start to look at some of those positive aspects so you can build on those successes more or less and start being able to apply that to other areas of your life. 95% of basically how we live is kind of our subconscious mind. Really only 5% is what we really perceive, and a lot of that is created in our childhood. So why is that we keep playing the same program over and over again within our bodies? Why is it that, you know, something that maybe happened to us 10, 15, 20, 30, even 40, 50, maybe 60 years ago, why is it that that one event, why are you still continuing to play that event over and over again in your brain, even though that it's long gone, it just hasn't happened there, even though it's still existing in your system? And basically it's how we perceive our stuff, you know, accurate or not, really impacts our physiology. And this is kind of one of the slides I added in because I want, does anyone, it is a great book. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend reading The Biology Belief by Bruce Lipton. He's a molecular biologist. I mean, for you guys who have read the book, you know, you'll probably, you know, good for you guys, this will probably be a little repeat for you, but it's always good to hear the stuff that you like. I always like that. Anyways, some people don't for some reason. But epigenetics is one of his kind of the main focus. It's kind of the new science in the sense of genes, the way we look at them. Epigenetics, the genetic code more or less in the sense of when they take a look at kind of human biology, they thought that, okay, well, we're going to need, I think think it was like 150,000 genes or something like that to be able to produce all the proteins that we need within our body. And when they actually mapped out the genome, it was I think like 30,000 that we had. So obviously there's a big difference between how many we actually need versus how many, you know, in the sense of where our current thought process was of how the body works in order to get there. And epigenetics, long story short, is basically how the gene twists on itself through methylation, and it really changes the basically expression of those genes. So, and not only that, but it's inheritable too. So, in the sense that when we take a look at twins, so twins are born, they have the genetic, you know, identical genetic code if they're identical twins. But as someone progresses through life, their epigenetics, when they actually take a look at that, they're completely different when they're at 70 compared to when they're born, they're almost identical. So literally, your body's learning throughout its life. It's learning from things that happens to it, learning how to basically either be healthy, how to maybe defend itself, how to be, you know, protect itself more or less. And that stuff gets incorporated into those aspects. And they're finding out more so now that it's actually heritable, that you can pass that on to your offspring. The other thing I want to talk about with this one, which I can't remember if it's in the book or not, but basically, you know, if a mother's in fight or flight, you know, how does this affect a baby? And this is one of the other things that kind of, you know, because I always talk about this defense physiology in other classes. How does that relate? You know, how does that relate to this? And that's what I guess I'm getting into. But if the mom is in fight or flight, so if she's under constant stress, it can be the physical, it can be the mental, it can just be the emotional stress of pregnancy. I mean, you got emotions anyways, but you know, basically being, you know, on top of that. But if you are in some sort of stressful environment, you know, not only are those hormones affecting you, but those same hormones are going into, you know, that baby that's growing within you. And they've shown through research that, you know, I think it's, you can almost impact the brain by changing intelligence by almost half. So if the mom's in a stressful environment, you know, in the sense if you think of an adult who has stress physiology, where does the blood go? Question. Where does the blood go? Well, through the baby. But so if you take the baby out of the situation, say you're stressed in this room, where's that blood going? If you get stressed, what's
goes into your core, goes out of your brain into your core.
Exactly, it goes into the muscles, you know, stuff like that, so you can get away. So that same exact process is happening in the baby. So when it hits that core, like into your core, where it starts shutting things off and starts, you know, turning things on, that's why the babies who, from mothers who are born from very stressful situations, are very muscular and relatively small-brained. And I mean, this was the rats that they showed it, and I think the brain size was almost half in the one that grew up in a stressful situation. But I mean, it looked like this thing that was on like steroids, freak mouse, and then with this little itty bitty brain, and then the one that was in this nurturing environment had this like giant brain with this little body. And it was kind of, I mean, it was pretty weird in the sense of looking at it, but it makes sense because that same thing that's happening within the mother is basically being expressed within the fetus, what's happening within you. So, and then you start to think about that, well, that's what you start carrying around in your system as you start to come out. You start viewing the world as that it's a stressful, fearful place and you need to defend yourself. It's good adaptation, just not necessarily what you want. But it also, too, if you think about it, and you think about like a lot of the football players, where do they come from? I mean, those are the biggest, I mean, guys you can think of in the sense of they're just monsters, more or less. I mean, a lot of them come from inner city areas where moms, they might be from single-family homes, stuff like that. But let's move on from this one. Final thing I just want to help you guys understand is basically a cell cannot be in growth and defense at the same time. So in the sense of that fight or flight response, if your body's in that fight or flight response, it's not going to be in a growth response. It's going to be in one or the other. And that's one of the huge things that he really realized in the, basically, it talks about it within the book, that he really realized in the sense of creating shift, creating change, why that fight or flight response is so devastating for people. So posturing. So I just kind of talked a little bit about this in that sense of that stress response. So someone's kind of basically their anatomy, their physiology, kind of their, you know, their posture more or less really reflects kind of the emotional state of what's going on within them. So I'm going to have you guys participate with this one. So what I want you guys to do is you can sit there, but I want you to assume an angry posture. If you were angry, what would you be like? Yeah. Lean forward. So, okay. So the next thing is so you're angry. Now take a depressed posture. Just think of someone who's depressed. Now I want you to think of joy or ecstasy. What does that look like? That is fun. So what were people aware of within themselves? What did you do differently?
You change your structure.
Exactly. You changed your structure. You basically changed how your body's holding itself. And I mean, everyone, you watching you guys, it's all real similar. I mean, it might be like this, it might be like this for anger. It's just like, you're getting to this defense posture, depressed. It's like, you think about Charlie Brown, or you get this like drooped over appearance, and it's just to give you a brief aspect of the science, because I really don't want to get too much into it, but they found out that the majority of the limbic tissue is in the spinal cord. The limbic tissue is what perceives emotions within your body. So literally, depending on the tone, the shape, the tension on your spinal cord is going to affect which molecules are going to be able to attach. This isn't a very mechanistic model too, but which molecules are going to basically be able to attach to that, to be able to have that, to more or less experience that emotion, which is one of the reasons why I think in the sense you change your posture like this, but that's stretching that spinal cord in a different way. Not only that, but where the limbic tissue sits, all the information that's going up to your brain gets filtered through that limbic tissue, because it's on really biology nuts, I guess. It sits in the dorsal horn, which is kind of the afferent aspect of the nerve, which the nerve goes into your spinal cord, and right there is all that limbic tissue, and that information that's coming in gets filtered through whatever emotional state you're in before your brain even perceives it. So think about the time when you were maybe, pissed off, for lack of a better word, just really angry, you stubbed your toe. How much worse did that hurt compared to where you're really happy and running around and all of a sudden you stub your toe? Two very different experiences, even though the same thing happened. I watched this, and my son, I think it was probably like 3 months ago, but he was like really excited and running around and just like tripped and just racked his head on the door. And he just like kept getting up and just kept playing, and like 2 days later we realized he was this monster bruiser right here, and I'm like, you didn't even cry. Compared to where his other ones, like he trips and falls, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're okay, but he's crying. So, kids, they just express it. They don't have to go through these filters. They just express what's going on, and it's amazing to see how quickly and effectively their body can change. Posture and posturing. So we talked about posture in the sense of you can just, based in the sense of your emotional state, you're going to assume these different postures. So think of someone who's chronically depressed or chronically angry. Their body's constantly like this. Where are they going to be building tension? Where are they holding tension? That's why when we take a look at someone on the table and we know, okay, they're laying on the table, they're like this, we're like, okay, that person's probably angry a good chunk of the day, and that's what is stored into their system. And that's really how and that's where the phasing system came out of, but that's really how that physical posture can help us understand some of the emotional aspects of what's going on within someone. So it's one of the ways. It's one of the ways. So the shape, position, tone, and tension in your spine is in relationship to the shape, position, tone, and tension in your life. So, and I guess the final thing I want you to understand is when something stressful does happen to you, how do you know it's stressful? Like what happens for you?
You tense up and hold your breath.
Hold your breath.
Heart can start pounding, you get tense and clenched.
Exactly, and those are the things I just want you to start being aware of. Because when you get stressed, what happens? Because your body, everyone's body is going to respond a little bit differently. But realize in the sense of that tension pattern, that posture, that posturing, how your body responds. Everyone's body, they kind of, from lack of a better explanation, but it's just learned more or less how to deal with stress in its own unique way. And then in its own unique ways, when you start getting stressed, then that tension starts building, and then your response is also reflected within that too. So, reorganizational healing. I wanted to talk a lot about, and I shouldn't say a lot, I just wanted to mention about this a little bit tonight because reorganizational healing developed out of a level 3 concept, more or less. In the sense of you're not moving away from something, you're moving towards something, you're trying to create what you want in life. And that's technically more of a transformational, which is a level 2 response, but realize the whole concept of reorganizational healing is really developed out of network, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that is in a second, but where is your focus? What are you focused on in life? And this is, once again, getting back to your goals. Like, what I want you to do is just take a look at your goals right now before I can go to the next slide. You don't have to tell anyone what they are, so that way no one has to feel bad maybe what they wrote down if it wasn't exactly what it should be, because there isn't a right or wrong answer here. That's what I want you guys to also understand. Just realize it just helps give you guys a guide in the sense of where we want to move towards. So where's your focus? Are you focused on the past or are you focused on the future? I mean, you can't create something in your life if you're focused on moving away from something. I mean, think about this. It's like, okay, I want to get out of Denver. How is the only way that you know that you're getting out of Denver? You want out, but you still have to have a concept point of where Denver is.
Or where
right?
you're going.
Well, that's a different concept, though. Not where you're going. That's a different concept. But in the sense of if your only goal was to leave Denver, right? The only way that you knew that you were leaving Denver was still have to look in the rearview mirror and still have some reference point that where Denver's at, and know that you're moving away from that. The same thing goes for pain. It's like, oh, I want to get rid of this pain in my foot. Well, the only way that you know that you're getting rid of that pain in your foot is to focus on the pain in your foot. And unfortunately, when it's like, okay, I want to move away from this, the only way to know is that you're still focusing on it. And the unfortunate aspect is the more you focus on something, the more you create it within your life. So let's kind of take a look at this. So have you ever asked someone what they want and they told you what you don't want? And that's what I want you to start to take a look at. Are your goals that you wrote down something that you actually want, or is it something that you don't want? And if you wrote down something that you don't want, how can you change that into something that you want? As opposed to, I want to lose weight. I don't want to be fat. I want to be fit and healthy. Two very different concepts. So Maggie, just like you were stating, it's like, well, you have a different point and you're moving towards that point. I mean, I would expect a response like that on someone who just went to the game. So, definitely a lot better connection there. So, I don't want to die compared to I want to live. Two very different aspects. How are you going to live your life in that sense? I mean, think about someone, I want to be healthy, or, I don't want to be fat, versus, okay, I want to eat as healthy as I can be. I don't want to be poor, I want to have abundance and prosperity. I mean, there's a giant range in there if you're not poor compared to the abundance and prosperity. So moving towards one absolutely almost makes the other one obsolete. So changes, so we just kind of talked about this, what are your goals? Realize that your present reality is a function and a habit of, basically a function of the habits you've had in the past. And realize that if, how you want to change your future, start changing those habits that you have today, because those are what's going to create your future. And what can you do for yourselves to be able to do that? So, in the sense of the restorative healing, more or less you're looking in that rearview mirror, because you're constantly, you think of the medical system, what are they doing? They're constantly like, how can I get rid of this pain? How can I decrease your cholesterol? It's all disease, it's all symptom, it's all just this negative process. Never is the concept of I actually want to be healthy, what do I do to do that? I mean, it's not even really taught in medical school. I mean, nutrition's not taught in medical school, I know exercise isn't taught in medical school. It's kind of weird in the sense of what my friends are outside of here, because I have a lot of medical doctor friends and have a lot of nurse friends, and I think it's just because, it's just subculture in the sense that I exist in, and it's just listening to them talk about, the what's going on within their practices, their lives, and how they're dealing with stuff. I'm like almost like ripping my hair out. It's just like, okay, I'm just gonna bite my tongue again. But it's sad because I think the saddest thing in the whole situation is they truly want to do good, but they just don't have the tools to be able to do that. And there's very few people in the medical system that truly, you get bad apples everywhere, but I mean, for the most part, they all are trying to do good. They're all trying to help people, but they don't understand the sense of like, what actually is it to help someone. So, Restorative Therapeutics, this paper actually, I think came out maybe 2008 or maybe 2009, Reorganizational Healing paper. If you haven't read it, just Google it. You can probably find it online. You can download it for free. I think the Global Gateway Foundation pays for the downloads of that one, but it's a great tool. It's a great aspect for you to learn more about some of these concepts that I'm going to be going into real quick. But once again, the reason we're going through this is to help you understand a little bit more about where someone's at compared to where we want to go. How can we shift our focus? Seeks cause, blame. Pretty much talked about all this, so I'm just going to kind of move through. So, something is disturbing the way the person is feeling and living. The disturbance is wrong and must be stopped. The assumption by stopping the symptom or crisis, the individual can resume as closely as possible as his previous life routines and actions. And success is return to the previous and familiar place. If what you were doing led you to where you're at, do you think bringing you back to where you were at is going to create any sort of difference? No. It seems pretty simple, but when you start thinking about that, it's like, okay, well, why? I won't lie, it's challenging. Like, say you're dealing with a health challenge, like, well, I liked my life the way it was. I want to go back to that. Well, maybe that symptom, maybe whatever disease, whatever is going on within your system, is really trying to help shift your focus, change your focus, so you can create whatever changes in your life that needs to happen. That's much more of that reorganizational healing aspect of taking a look at the things that we maybe were perceiving as negative and realizing that they could be the greatest blessing in the world for you to create a shift within your life. So either you can create more congruence or more happiness, more of what you are actually, who you're supposed to be. Skip some of these. So reorganizational healing is defined as an approach to healing in life which seeks to both optimize existing structures and fields of influence, bringing them into a more dynamic, aware, and responsive state, while producing new sustainable emerging properties which can assist in self-regulation and growth and evolution of the systems. There's a lot in that definition. We're breaking it down in the sense that you're trying to maximize it. You're not just trying to get it back to this par state. Dynamic is this constant state of change, but of being become aware, you can make different choices. You can move in different directions. Something that you might have been moving towards here might not be where you need to continue to go towards. So, with this you're trying to create connection, depth, meaning, all of those aspects. So, we already talked about this in the sense of really taking a look at the symptom that you're experiencing and just starting to view it differently. So, okay, triad of change. If you've been to my reorganizational healing class, you've seen this slide. But this is actually, it took me a long time to really understand this and to try to apply it, and I still feel that I have a ways to go to truly grasp all of what this potential is for this. But in the sense of Donald Epstein, kind of the founder of Network, he created a lot of other technologies, more or less, that he utilizes in the sense to create healing for someone. We're going to go through some of those overlaps tonight to really help you understand what level 3 is all about, kind of the consciousnesses behind it, the other ways that you can maybe potentially gain and access to some of those to basically help create growth for yourself. The life force, emotional, mental, and spiritual, those are the energetic intelligences you have access to. I'll explain what that is in a little bit. But basically, perception, behavior, and structure. we all have kind of what's unique for us, in the sense of our strategy for success. So you think of someone who had success doing it one way, it might not even work for someone else. So think about how you go through your daily life. Think about when you're the happiest. Is it, are you just doing stuff? Or is it, and let me help you, I guess let me explain a little bit more in the sense of, let me catch up to where we're at. In the sense of perception, behavior. Perception is really kind of the meaning you give to something. The thought process, not necessarily much the thought process, because you can think differently, but basically the body sensation, the emotion, the meanings you give to something, and the story you kind of have behind it. So it's like, do you kind of go through your day perceiving about kind of what's happening around you and then change your actions? The direct actions you take is much more of your behavior, and then the structure is the organization, the timing, the schedule about this stuff. So someone who might be, you think about those people, you might know someone who's completely unorganized, and you're like, dude, how does this person even get through their day? And for someone who doesn't, if you don't lead with structure, this statement probably won't even make sense to you. But that's okay. But when we take a look at this, so if you lead through perception and behavior, and someone who functions in a structured environment, and then you try to take that person into structure, like if it's like, okay, this person functions there, but now all of a sudden you got to do this, and your day is like, you got to do this at this time, you got to do this at this time, you got to do this at this time. That's going to be extremely painful for that person. But for someone who leads with structure, they're going to do extremely well with that. So take a look in the sense of like your life. It's like, okay, where maybe, if I lead with structure and I'm struggling with something, how can I add more structure into this to be able to get better connected into it, to basically make it more functional for me. Same thing with behavior. Maybe you're someone who just needs to start doing things and moving through it in that aspect where, we've had people kind of cover our office before. I'm sure some of you guys have met them. And we've had someone come in, they want to know exactly what every single button does. And we've had other people who lead with behavior like, you know what, I'll just get there and I'll figure it out. And it's like I take a look at the notes of what they wrote down, and it's like the person who just like, I'll just figure it out on my own, they had better notes than the person who knew what every button did. It's just like, it's just how they led their life, and it works for them. And that's what I just want to help you understand the sense of with this is perception is like, do you need to start really, like the emotions, do you want to start paying attention to some of that? What's the greater meaning behind it? Do you want to focus on that as opposed to every single little detail? And that's what the triad of change is all about, and trying to help you create more successful change. So, the seasons of influence. Now, the Awaken, the one I want to point out here is the Awaken, because the Awaken is really much more the level 3 influence, the level 3 concept. So, there's four levels of care, which then basically levels 1 and level 2 of care. I guess I'll kind of diverge for a second, but in the sense of network, there's 4 levels of care that were developed. 3 were taught. 4th was kind of always an application done at kind of like some special seminars, different places. That Donald was really working with people, and it was in existence. So there was like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Each level of care has A, B, and C to it. So there's like 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, B, C, 3A, B, C, and then there was 4A and B. And there was not really ever 4C talked about. But what ends up happening is he actually combined levels 3 and 4, and just that's considered advanced care. And the reason they consider it advanced care is because levels 1 and level 2 are more so the chiropractic application of network. Level 3, basically what formerly level 3, which is advanced care, is basically it's a wellness application. And to help you understand more about what that is, so I know you guys have heard me talk about subluxation, the subluxation distortion pattern, and how the spine subluxates and all that stuff, but level 1 is just helping the body connect back into itself. Start discovering some aspects of itself. What's working, what's not working, what are the problems, stuff like that. Level 2 is where those subluxation distortion patterns, like in the middle of level 2 is where they disappear. So in the sense of I'll just give them a little bit more chiropractic aspect, but chiropractic is basically the detection and correction of subluxation. So if you don't have a subluxation, you're not technically practicing an aspect of what chiropractic is, which is why it's a wellness approach and wellness application. So there are people following you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm just boring people or just giving things.
Nope.
But that, I mean, this is how it's different in that sense. So, and why those were combined back in. So, and there's different oscillators. I'll help show you guys what that looks like in a little bit. But realistically, discovers level 1, transforms level 2, awaken is advanced care, and then integrate is taking some aspect of those and kind of incorporating it back in. So someone can be in advanced care or level 3 of care, and you can start doing maybe a basic contact on them to create a different change, a different response within their system. Discover is basically kind of, it's almost like a developmental thing in the sense you take a look at it's more of like the childlike behavior, learning, doing different things like this. In transform, the whole concept of a problem doesn't exist. The concept of a problem only even exists in discover. And because in transform what happens is you don't see the problem, you only see where you're going to. You're only seeing the future. What once was perceived as problems are more so your guides to where you want to get to. And awaken is basically, it's a be rather than do. It's a state of being more or less. So you're not sitting there, you're not trying to create all these different things. You know, we experience the love, the energy, just those emotions. You can just take a look at those emotions. The next slide is actually run through some more of the emotions of those. But basically, as you start kind of reaching the end of awaken, you start to experience, you want to start giving gifts back to the world. And when you start getting even further on, not only is the gift being able to give, but the gift is actually being able to receive the gift too. Which I think some people have been there, in the sense of being able to receive rather than just give. And the other thing to realize too is, you don't want to necessarily place judgment on where you're at. I mean, everyone in this room is beyond discovered. I mean, so that's, in the sense of where I know your strategies are. So you can kind of, give yourselves a little pat on the back because you've put in a lot of time, you've put in a lot of effort to where you've gotten to today. So, based in the sense of with Awaken, I mean, there's no need for the problem. The problems doesn't exist. And really the external conditions, I mean, in the sense of what we're perceiving as bad, your body doesn't respond the same to those because you're not perceiving it as a threat anymore. You're perceiving it as a gift. I mean, and the final thing I want to talk about with this, so we can kind of move forward, is that once you start, when you're truly in Awaken, you start to realize that some of the things that you perceived as bad in the past, you truly realize that they were your greatest gifts. In the sense of what that did was it completely shifted your life, completely shifted everything about you, and started moving you in a different direction that would have probably never happened. Even though it could have been something extremely horrible. What you have to realize is you're taking that energy and you're being able to transform that into growth, into change, and you would never want that to change because you realize that that's helped you become who you actually are. So what are the emotions of Awaken? Faith, gratitude, awe, divine presence, passion, selflessness, grace, love, trust, compassion, empathy, heartfelt compassion, unity, joy. I just want you guys to pause for a second and what would those mean if you had some more of that within your life? Or what would your life be different if you lived with more joy? If you lived with more gratitude? How would your actions be different? How would your interactions with people be different? So, and realize with this change is you can start to, you have the ability to influence your future. And you want to be the change that you want to see within the world. So now on to the intelligences. These have probably gone through the greatest transformation of any of the things that are talked about. When we take a look at the intelligences, they're originally called the biofields in the sense that the biology created the field. Then they became the organizing fields, so in the sense that the fields actually organized the biology, and now, which is a completely different concept as in the house, is what they're currently called. But so if you hear the word like biofield, organizing field, or house, which we probably won't ever really use that one in here because people get really confused. What about my house? But it's more of a state of being. It's like almost like a codependence. Like they function together as a unit. I guess in the sense of, so the bioenergy, I'll get to that in a second. But the thing that I want you, what they're starting to find out with physics is pretty much all of the medical system, I mean, all of it's really based on Newtonian physics. I mean, it's very linear in nature. And what they're starting to find out is that these subtle energy fields actually have a greater impact on the material world in manifesting itself than the material world has in kind of influencing itself. And I guess in the simple, just an example, this one study that they did was they took a mother and a daughter, put them in 2 separate rooms, completely shielded, I mean lead, copper, I mean everything to cut every sort of wave out, and what they did was shine a light in the daughter's eyes and the mom's pupils constricted. And, I mean not like this, but there was a response. So obviously there's some aspect of connection, there's some sort of greater connection that exists there than, in the sense of the way the medical, the way biology is even taught that exists.
Did they test it the other way? As if they shine the light in mom's eyes to the children?
I don't remember. I don't.
Excellent question.
They very well could have. I just don't remember all the details of that one. I mean, I'm not going to get into all the different ones that can, in the sense of like biophotons and stuff. But let's just say this. I mean, either way, like, there's some aspect of connection that we all possess. I mean, not only that, but I mean, when a baby's in utero, there's actually stem cells, so that literally leave the baby's body, travel up to the mother's brain, and I think it's the hypothalamus that they implant into. And it's one of the reasons why I think moms have this kind of innate, like, different sense about their kids. They know something's wrong, even though their kid might be 10 miles away, 100 miles away. Even before the phone even rings, they know something's wrong. So, and that's one of the kind of the thought processes behind that, is why that is. So there is that greater connection. So intelligences, I mean, they affect our conscious states. And basically in the sense of how I want to define consciousness, it's basically a way of describing the level of awareness that someone, from which we observe something with. The higher level of consciousness, the more complexly we observe the situation or circumstance. And why does this make importance? Is because in the sense of from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, the consciousness basically, they keep talking about this consciousness expanding. Your world of existence expands in the sense of like what you're connected to in those states. So here are the different energetic intelligences, kind of what they have an aspect in being to. And you can, I mean, it seems so simple in the sense when you take a look at it, but basically the bioenergetic is just kind of just in the sense of it's the field more or less that exists nearest to your body, and they kind of literally just extend out from there. So if you just kind of follow the list on the left down, it's a further extension out that it has. So it just basically relates to kind of basic metabolic function, basic biology, how your body exists. The emotional state, I mean, literally correlates to the emotions and the emotion that someone is experiencing. Lower thought is different in the sense it's asking kind of lower level questions like where, when, how. And then the upper level, I mean, in the sense, I mean, thought is kind of its own field, but they break it down into 2. But then the upper level, or the upper thought, energetic intelligence, really asks the question why. Greater understanding. You're seeking that greater understanding. Then the soul is kind of the connecting to everything, and then the universal spirit more or less relates to one's connection to basically the all being, the fabric of creation, synchronicity, and you can just kind of see that hierarchy, how it goes. So realize there's lots of different ways that we can affect that. You'll see maybe in the sense of how far we approach from someone's body. If we're attempting to, you can actually take, not only enter in from someone's body, like as we leave someone's body too. So if people will come and ask us, well, why do you do it like this? And unfortunately, it's like, I don't want to get into all this at that state. Because normally the person asking the question is like, has no concept of this. But realistically, it's like the different energetic intelligences have different varying degrees of how far away they are from the body. So we can take that intelligence and be able to bring it into the body, and it's like, okay, well maybe there is upper thought, maybe there's something wrong in their life where it's like you want to bring more of this, and then you can exit into the emotional state to help them connect more of like the why into their emotions. So.
I think you look like a conductor. So I tell people to conducting some unheard music.
Sure. The music of life. So, I mean, and that's, there's also tissue depth too, so you might feel sometimes pushing really hard compared to really light, to where you're like, I'm not sure, did he touch me? Is he still touching me? The tissue depth also relates to this. It's very subtle, so in the sense of I'm not going to expect someone to necessarily practice it unless you have a lot of experience with the fine-tuning of those aspects. So network spinal analysis, we're finally to it. Talked about all the other ones. So I'm going to kind of blow through this one pretty quick, most because I know you guys have concepts of this, you guys have better understanding of this, and I want to get to the examples. But network spinal analysis, how does it relate to what we're talking about? So the waves have really shown to break down that defensive physiology, specifically the somatopsychic wave. And that's in the sense of as it's traveling through that body, traveling through those lesions, traveling through those subluxation distortions, it's starting to reorganize, it's starting to create that shift, to create that change within someone's body. So they don't have to keep living their life in that emotional state, in that consciousness that they're living in, so they can start shifting their consciousness and start thinking differently about what's going on. You guys all experienced the work, so know what that is. So level 3 of care, this is the Awaken and Expand. Level 1 of care is discover, connect and discover. I mean, if you just kind of think about what those words mean, it'll give you, I mean, that's literally what level 1 is about. Level 2 is transform and refine. So you're trying to refine someone's strategies that they have, but really transform what's going on within their body, so they can start to really experience their life, experience what's going on. So they don't have to really function from a state of defense, they can function from a state of growth. And then the level 3, so greater self-awareness and consciousness awakening of the relationships between the body, mind, emotion, and expression of the human spirit are realized through this level of care. So, has everyone here pretty much seen the somatopsychic wave? Okay, I think most of you guys have been to the level 2 class. What the research is kind of shown in the sense of the greater thinking of what they think is happening now is the heart is actually influencing that wave. Because what happens is the pulse comes out of the wave, there's literally this kind of like electrical signal that gets shot down the body, and then it gets shot back up the body. And then what actually happens, it comes up through the carotid bodies and into the brain, and then it starts more or less oscillating on both sides independently. And that's where those frequent, like there's more or less oscillators is what they call it, and then they call it frequency entrained oscillators when they start resonating at the same frequency at a certain frequency more or less, which is one of health and growth. That's what they think starts the wave. And one of the reasons they found that out is because if someone has like sclerosis of the aorta, something going on, like basically that, like it's impossible for someone to actually have the somatopsychic wave. So, and that's why you might hear us talk about spinal entrainment, is because we're actually entraining the system, we're entraining those frequency entrained oscillators to different resonances within someone's system, and those resonances are the different kind of the postural distortions within someone's system. So, it's an entrainment is what you might hear us call it. So, obviously it's a lot more than just an adjustment. So SRI, this is kind of the final one of the technologies I want to talk about, and the only reason I want to help you guys understand a little bit more about this is because just like with the seasons of the seasons of influence, SRI has also stages that correlate with level 3 of care, or advanced care, but I want to kind of run through those with you. So somato-respiratory integration, somato meaning body, respiratory meaning breathing. Integration is designed to offer you new options of reorganization in your experience of your body and your personal healing. It educates you to your body's rhythms and inner wisdom through focused attention, gentle breath, motion, and touch. So when you go back to that triad of change, and there's the structure on the bottom, behavior on the right, and then you have perception on the left, the NSA functions in the structure and behavior side of it. Because the wave is that behavior, and then the structure is how your spine is shifting and changing. The SRI functions in the structure and perception aspect more so, because it's able to give you more of that perceptive thing, because it's hands-on, you're feeling what's going on with your body, and how you're perceiving what's going on in your body is making a shift in how you're changing your response. So for someone who might be really, if you're feeling ever really stagnant within care, you're like, why am I not making this breakthrough? What's not happening? Or, do I feel like I'm kind of regressing? SRI can be a huge thing for you to access into, because there's probably something going on within your life, probably, or in whatever aspect of your being, more or less, that's affecting it. And your brain's trying to help you become more aware of that, because to really be able to achieve level 3 and sustain level 3 of care, just to help you understand that the change from level 1 all the way up to level 2 of C, the change from 2C to 3A is greater than the entirety of what's happened up to that point. So realize there's a lot of shifting that has to happen in someone's system to actually create that final shift and move into more of this awakened state. So this is the stages. On the left is kind of the old, in the sense of like the 3A, 3B, kind of what those different stages correlated with. Basically, in stage 8, we experience the emptiness in the space. You really learn, you start to realize you're an awakened, and it's not even, it's not so much that you become aware of something, you notice that you're an awakened by noticing the absence of something. And the absence is that voice chatting in your brain, that inner talk, constantly doing this. You notice the absence of that. Not only that, but you start experiencing this almost like emptiness, but as opposed to kind of in the discover, where emptiness is associated with the negativity, where I'm isolated, I'm completely separated. In level 3, and especially in stage 8 3A, the emptiness, you're experiencing the emptiness, but also feeling connected to everything. So as opposed to feeling alone, you're feeling connected to literally everything. Stage 9, you start to basically experience that there's some form of light, there's some sort of energy out there that you might have access to, that you can use. And then in stage kind of 10, 3C, you are the light. You are that energy. You are that love. You are that emotion. And you realize that it is you, as opposed to being separate from you. And then in stage 11, you just want to bring it to everyone, bring it to the world. And then in stage 12, you just pretty much realize that as much as giving it to people, receiving it is just as much of a gift. And stages like 11 and 12 is much more about the whole aspect of the community, creating more of a consciousness and connection to everything. Where in stages kind of 8 through 10, it's still a lot of independent you and your perception of yourself, where stage 11 and 12 is more extending into everything. All right. I'm just going to skip this slide. I think we're ready for demonstrations. Let me read that quick. Okay. So, in the sense of tonight, once again, take a look at your goals, take a look at you know, what's going on? What's your standard? What do you want to have different within your life? How can you change your current thinking? How can you change your current, you know, voice structure of what you're telling yourself to create the change that you want to do? You know, raise your standards for yourself. Something that, you know, raise your what you're willing to accept. You know, am I going to continue to, you know, make exceptions for this thing that I view very important for myself, which would, you know, in the sense of that New Year's resolution, raise that standard. You know, make it so that you have to do that, and then, you know, how are you going to get there?